long ago, when the world was young, when promises were kept and the sun and trees were new, there was a woman. Let's call her Ophelia, for that was her name, and her name meant love. Now Ophelia was blessed with a very special talent. When the milky moon was high in the night sky, she would put on her beautiful fur cloak and was swallowed up in it all nice and warm. But this was no ordinary cloak, for when Ophelia wore it she could transform into a wolf and run through the glittering forest with her brothers, wild and free. She would spend these nights happier than you could imagine, and every morning she would cast off her magical cloak and walk undiscovered as a woman, hiding it beneath the juniper tree and going about her daily business. But all good things must come to an end. There was a farmer, you see, a local man with a wife-shaped hole in his bitter heart, a heart made all the more bitter for a lack of love and absence of laughter. The wolf pack had snatched up some of his chickens and gobbled away with them, you see, so he tracked them for 3 days and 3 nights, until at last he found them playing in the wood. But to his amazement, his astonishment, his wide-eyed wonder, he saw one of the wolves stand up on her hind legs, shedding her skin like a tree sheds its brittle leaves, revealing a woman, beautiful as the dawn. She cast the coat of furs into her usual hiding place beneath the juniper tree and drifted off into a slumber with her wolf pack. The farmer fell instantly in love. And though he was gobsmacked and banjaxed, bamboozled and agog, the farmer was a quick-thinking man, a real sly fox, and quick as a flash he dealt a swift and silent death to every slumbering beast, sparing only the girl, snatching the wolf cloak from beneath the tree and sneaking off into the night. When the woman woke from her deep slumber, she saw the destruction the farmer had left and was filled with despair. Days went by, and the heartbroken woman wandered the wood, in a deep state of sadness without her friends or her cloak. She wandered until her feet could wander no more, and she fell to the floor in a heap of sorrow. But then she heard a kindly voice calling out to her, "My dear, whatever's the matter?" and slowly looked up to glimpse a tall, handsome stranger dressed in the finest silken robes with the chiselled face of a daring hero. And as true as the stars sewn to the sky, as true as the meadow is green, no sooner had they locked eyes than they were in love. The kind of love that's written about on scrolls, that's sung about in high voices, that's carved into trees for all to see. He took her up in his arms and led her back to his home, Mowbray Hall. A great sprawling mansion it was too, once owned by the Sheriff of Lancashire. And when she saw the magnificent hall with a feast laid on, a smile blossomed at her lips and remained there for quite some time. And in time, she forgot her nights running with the wolves and the tragedy that befell her brothers, living happily ever after, laughing and joking and feasting every night, sleeping soundly on a bed of goose feathers, wanting only for a long and lovely life. Of course, he asked her to be his bride, and of course she said yes. It was to be a glorious day with bunting and confetti and silver and gold and long tables piled high with rare, curious treats, the likes of which had never been seen before and were not likely seen again until the glorious wedding celebrations up at the hillside. There was only one thing missing, rather curiously: the wedding guests. The bride had no family to speak of, that much we know. But what of the groom? and for the first time in months, our bride felt a tiny shiver of doubt. And so, on the morning of the wedding, wearing a gleaming white gown, all ready to say "I do," she walked into town and popped into the Eagle and Child. For she had heard the wisest woman of the town was the landlady there, and would surely know her beau. Aye, the barkeep nodded knowingly. This was indeed the wise woman, who went by the name of Isabel Burley, a name most of you will have heard of. Some of you may have seen beautiful tapestries dedicated to Isabel, for she made a great impact to this small town, as acts of kindness always do. He was just a common farmer before, Isabel says, and a bitter one for the bargain. But then one day he comes strutting into town bragging about how he bravely fought off a whole pack of wild and ferocious wolves, taking their magical precious pelt and selling it to a travelling merchant who works the market square for all the riches in the world. Ever since then he fancies himself a real dandy, holing up in that hole, keeping all his wealth for himself, paying the servants in crumbs and turning his nose up at charity. At that, the bride felt a sickness rise up from the pit of her stomach to the top of her head, shattering her delicate heart once more. Clutching her wedding dress like a galleon sail, she ran for the hills, sobbing and sore as she darted for the horizon. She remembered those dark, blessed nights running with her wolfkin, and a thought bloomed in her mind like a pretty new flax flower. If she could find her cloak, perhaps she could be happy again. The night was drawing in, and so she hid in a secret underground passage beneath Mowbray Hall. Pacing the dank tunnels underneath the town, she was given quite a fright when she turned and saw what looked like a small, pale creature cowering in the darkness. So she turned to run until a small voice called out, "Wait!" The bride squinted and saw it was a young Kirkhamer named Sue. She had spotted Sue and a few others before, playing in the grounds of the hall, daring each other to try and uncover the secret passageway and walk down it. Sue explained that she had been doing just that, on the promise of some penny sweets from her friends if she completed the dare, when a nasty creature called a boggart chased her all the way down and she had lost her way. And worse still, her mother would be expecting her home for tea some 2 hours ago. The woman knew nothing of boggarts, nor of brownies, yallery browns, bogles, or imps for that matter, so she asked for some enlightenment, and little Sue leaned in, delivering every syllable of her caution with great care.
Beware the boggart who stalks the land, for trickery lurks in his hidden hand. He'll sour your milk, he'll spoil your crops, for boggarts are wicked from bottoms to tops.
The bride thanked the girl for her caution and showed her the exit at St. Michael's Church. The bride journeyed on in search of the merchant who had her cloak. And soon enough she found herself squeezing through brock holes and creeping warily through boggart country. And before you could say uglier than a witch's handbag, she came face to face with a hideous and twisted boggart who stood mischievously by a stream with his hands behind his back.
"Halt you, wench, and hark at this,"
he rudely barked.
"If you want to pass by me, you'll have to play my little game."
"And how do we play this little game?" the woman asked, the child's warning echoing in her head like an old familiar song.
"In one hand, I hold a prize, and in the other certain death. All you have to do is pick one."
The woman glanced behind the creature and saw, reflected in the stream, that it held a dagger in one hand and a sack in the other. Without a second thought, the woman chose the hand with the sack. The boggart was livid, furious, incandescent with rage. He cursed and he spat and he swore. "How could she have known?" he cried, and in his fury his blood became so boiling hot that he had to dunk himself in the stream to cool down. The woman collected her prize, the sack, and asked the boggart what was so special about it. The sack, he explained begrudgingly, was like life. Whatever you put in, you get double back. To test this theory, the woman placed some berries in the sack, waited a moment, then opened it. To her surprise and amazement, there was double the amount, enough to sustain her for days. After more wandering through villages and towns, over fields and through forests, uphill and down, she came to the market, and near the curved fish stones she found the merchant. Ah, yes, the fish stones, symbolic of the town's market charter granted in 1296, said to be used by fishmongers to cool and sell their wares. She told him her story of her wolf brothers and the farmer's cruel trickery, and she pleaded for the return of her beloved cloak. But when the merchant finally got a word in edgewise, he had bad news. He'd already sold the magic wolf pelt, traded that very morning for 50 pieces of silver. "You want to head up to the old abandoned mill," said the merchant. "A wise and beautiful old sorceress still weaves there. Some call her the Spirit of Progress. A kind and protective soul, keeps a watchful eye over everyone who ventures there. Not sure what she wanted with your cloak like, but if she wants something with you, it usually means you've a lesson to learn." If she hurried, she would make it there before nightfall. And so hurry she did, and before the sky began to darken and the stars peeped out from their soot-black hidey holes, our runaway bride came upon the old mill, and in it the wise old sorceress greeted her. She was seated at a loom, weaving a beautiful tapestry, her hair impossibly long and quite white. She seemed to shine against the stark walls of the mill. The bride pleaded with the sorceress to return her coat. She'd give anything, she cried, anything. But the old woman did not look up. Instead, she smiled, a kind and knowing smile of sailing cloth and rose queen gowns, of velvet, twills and cord, a smile that knew of broken hearts and their cures. And as she smiled, her fingers worked their bewitching charms, and a simple piece of cloth fell to the floor. The bride saw carefully stitched lettering appear before her very eyes upon the cloth. What can be touched but can't be seen? The loving human heart. The town with church and home in its name is where your journey starts. You must wander the hills, watch over the town till the year 2022. The true meaning of love will be told by its people, and your cloak returned to you. So the woman did as the sorceress said, and waited and waited and waited as the years drifted by, and each new year sounds sailed through the air from the town, which taught the bride little by little about love. She learned of brass bands playing, wedding bells ringing, friends holding hands, of first kisses, last dances, club days, first dates, family meals, and the first slurps of bright blue bubblegum ice cream from a place called Silverdells. All these loves, and many more. The young people of the town knew about the woman in white who wandered the nearby hills and would often bring her food to keep her going, reassured by young Sue, now much older and wiser, while our bride was strangely untouched by the hands of time, for magic is quite wonderful like that. One day, Sue sent the littlest in her family at the time, her great-great-granddaughter Audrey,
a feisty young girl from a big family who had to fight her brother for an extra slice of currant round to bring a gift to the bride. Audrey became a regular visitor, sometimes bringing her sister Shirley along with an offering of sweet currant rounds. They would tell her the latest goings-on in the town, how much it was changing, and she in turn would tell them what she had learned in her many years atop the hill. It was the comical stories that the children enjoyed the most.
But behind the laughter, the bride was hiding a deep sadness, for she had lost much and was bound to her quest. The stories of the town became the medicine for her broken heart. She urged the young people to discover more about it, take in its sights and bring her news, for she was afraid to leave the outskirts until the year etched in cloth by the wise sorceress. Soon the young people grew older and visited the bride much less, but the yearly sound of marching and merriment kept her entertained. Of course, it was the prestigious Club Day. Kirkham is a town whose strong Club Day tradition has remained unaltered by the hands of time, and she'd listen with glee from the hills, sometimes able to spot a rose queen who she'd shared a story with, basking in cheerful melodies, brass bands bellowing, choirs singing in full voice, funfair fanfares, banners aloft and blowing in the elements come what may. The bride had watched over the town for 2,000 years. She'd seen it all. From the early Roman settlers who made their home there, to the clever weavers who turned flax flowers into beautiful garments and helped Kirkham to prosper. The Langtons, Hornbys and Burleys, of course. And with their busy factories and great wealth, the town grew and grew and grew until it became the wonderful place it is today. But one year, an eerie silence crept over the town. No club day to speak of. No visits from her friends. Until finally, the clock struck midnight on January 1st, 2022, and the bride finally understood. She ventured out from her hiding place in the hills and into the town. And with the wisdom of the crowds there to greet her, together they solved the sorceress's riddles, and at last the bride knew the true meaning of love. She hopped atop the famous fish stones and shared her words of wisdom with the crowds gathered below. I have learned of true love, love lost and found and happiness made anew, she said. But there is one thing that I have learned that shines brightest of all, brighter than 1,000 Rose Queen smiles gleaming on a sunny club day, louder than the biggest brass band and truer than the truest tales. And that is this. Love has many names, many forms, many meanings. It cannot be bought and sold, nor can it be faked or forged, for its power lies in that which cannot be seen with the naked eye. It is a feeling, unique to every beating heart, and fueled by a sense of connection, of coming home. I see those connections here today as real as life itself. Connections to one another, to our sense of place, our history and community, and also in the connections we have with ourselves, which we must maintain by being bold and sharing our stories. At that, the sorceress appeared, bearing the magical wolfskin cloak. She returned the cloak slowly to Ophelia. "Ophelia," she said, "you have listened closely to the spirit of this town and its people. You have learnt from them the power of their stories, and here you have found a sense of belonging and the true essence of the word love. I reward you with your enchanted cloak. Like the many people who have found their home here in Kirkham, you now know that love is but another word for home." Ophelia addressed the crowd one last time before turning to leave. "Thank you, wonderful people of Kirkham, for you have helped me in ways that you will never know. I must leave this place tonight, and on the next full moon I shall return to my wolfen form, my broken heart mended at last, and I shall finally know peace. but I will never forget this glorious town that you call home, and will forever carry it with me in my heart. And what became of that devious trickster? The farmer who stole her cloak and her heart, what became of him? Legend has it that when he was jilted at the altar, he was filled with regret and spent the rest of his days wandering the earth in solitude. And for all we know, he wanders there still, while the bride, on the other hand, lived happily ever after.